Thanks to all of you. I first just have to say it's an extraordinary honor to be here. Having been involved with the Rome Call before it became the Rome Call, this isn't just a milestone. It is in some ways a bit of a dream come true, and I know for Monsignor Paya, he especially feels that way. It is not a typical day. All the world's, or so many of the world's great religions are reflected and represented here in this room, as well as a few tech companies, great companies like Cisco and IBM, great academic experts and leaders. In some ways, half of the success of today comes from just getting us together. The other half depends on what we do here, what we talk about, the views we share, what we decide to do, and how we go forward in the future. I thought it was put so well before because there's really two things to think about and talk about. The first is everything that can go wrong, and the second is everything that can go right. The truth of the matter is, for people who work in the tech sector, most of the time, most of the people get up on most mornings thinking about everything that can go right. That is the kind of optimism that is required to invent something new, to pour yourself into it. But we've also seen, I think, not just in the past decade, but for several centuries, all the things that can go wrong when people fail to think hard enough, when people fail to worry. You really need to keep both of these aspects together. And I believe the world's great religions have a vital role in helping us do that. All you need to do is read the 10 Commandments to see that from the days of Moses, there was a focus on both. Now, 8 of the 10 Commandments are about everything that could go wrong. They say, do not murder, do not steal, do not bear false witness against your neighbor, but there are 2 that I think were about what could go right. Honor your father and your mother. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Inspire people to build a better world. And that is what we have the opportunity to do with artificial intelligence. The Rome Call, I think, at its heart is about 3 things. The first is about ensuring that it actually brings the benefits of AI to the people of the world, that we do think about it, I think quite rightly, as a 21st century human right. And while we get together at these meetings and we talk about the Rome Call, we perhaps should spend a little more time reading it, because to me, the first paragraph of the introduction calls on us to ensure that AI serves the entire human family, the family that is represented in this room. And we can't do that if we cannot bring it to the world. And I will say, I think we do need to bring it to the world because the benefits that it offers are life-changing. Think about another story or parable in religion, helping a blind person see. The best way to save a person's eyesight is to ensure that they never lose it in the first place. And yet we live in a world today where there is a disease for people who have diabetes, diabetic retinopathy. People with diabetes have a higher risk of developing blindness. The interesting thing about it is that if it's diagnosed early, it is easy to treat and save someone's sight. But there's a huge problem in the world today. We have 8 billion people in the human family and only 230,000 ophthalmologists, almost all of whom live and work in the global north. Most people will never meet an ophthalmologist. But with an AI-enabled application and a smartphone that has a camera, a simple app can use that camera and look at someone's eye, and with a 98% accuracy, immediately diagnose whether someone has that disease if they have diabetes. That is life-changing. And I think it calls on us to think hard about how we can bring this technology to the world. And as we do so, I think we should keep in mind that the human track record in spreading technology is not altogether successful. I think in many ways AI will have as broad an impact on the world as electricity. And when you think about it, most of the conveniences of the modern world were built on electricity. Thomas Edison invented it in 1878 to do one thing, light a light bulb and bring lightness into the dark. But once it was created, it unleashed 20 years of invention of things that we still take for granted as vital to our world today, like an electric fan on a hot day in Hiroshima, or a blender or a phonograph. All of these things, like a vacuum cleaner, an electric oven, they were all invented in 20 years after the creation of electricity. Imagine what it must have seemed like for the first time when someone met a vacuum cleaner and how it changed the way one thought about keeping their home clean. But that was almost 150 years ago. And so almost 15 decades later, this morning, 700 million people, 6 times the population of Japan, got up without access to electricity. We have to do better, and that is a big part of what those of us in the tech sector are trying to do. But we needed to bring it to every part of every community, and I think that's what the Rome Call calls on us to do, to remember the most vulnerable, to remember the least privileged. And I think that is something that the great religions call on us to do as well. That is one opportunity we have to take away from this meeting. The second is to focus on the other side of that coin, everything that can go wrong. I tend to believe that the best way to solve a problem or avoid it is to worry about it. So it's probably not a terrible thing that 8 of the 10 commandments focused on what could go wrong in life. That's the best way to avoid those problems in the first place. And when you think about how powerful this technology has already become, I think it's right to focus not only on the experience with social media, but how people are using AI today, how they will use it in elections this year, how they will use it in the future. And unfortunately, it is being weaponized, in some cases by governments, in some cases by bullies, in some cases by people who want to prey on the elderly or the children, who want to defraud people of their money or make life more difficult for women, especially women in public life. And we need the great religions of the world, I think, to help focus us all on how we need to work together to solve those problems as well. And we did need to do so with the recognition that in the world today, it will take all of us working together to make a dent in these problems. It will take great leaders in government. It will take great religious leaders and academics. It will take tech companies and civil society. That's the only way we can make progress. And then there's a third aspect of the Rome Call that is such an interesting reflection of the time in which we live, because it calls on us not only to disseminate its benefits broadly and address what can go wrong with ethical standards, but to remember that we live at a time when we need to take special care to preserve the planet itself. And as we put AI to work, as we harness the electricity needed to put it to work, we also need to ensure that we use it both to make it more efficient, to bring online more sources of carbon-free energy, and to use AI itself to address the great climate challenges of not just this decade, but this century. We need to do all of these things as well. It's interesting because, in truth, every technology is both a tool and a weapon, and the more powerful the tool, the more formidable the weapon. And it's interesting to think about AI and compare and contrast it with nuclear power. The atom was harnessed as a weapon before it became a tool. AI is the opposite. It's been created as a tool, and we need to protect it so that it doesn't become a weapon. And it's right, I think, that we come to a place like Hiroshima and reflect on everything that can go wrong. That's a big part of what we'll do tomorrow. But there's a second aspect that I think is also more positive and inspiring that we have the opportunity to reflect upon tomorrow. This August will reflect the 79th anniversary of the dropping of these two terrible bombs on Japan. But we've gone 79 years since without them being used in anger against anyone else in the human family. And that did not happen by accident. It happened because people came together in the decade after the creation of the atom bomb and recognized that it could be a powerful tool if it was used wisely and well. Today, the world has nuclear power plants in 32 countries around the world. They're not always free of controversy, as we know here in Japan, but they're used for peaceful purposes. They're governed by the United Nations with inspection rights by the International Atomic Energy Agency, because the people of the 1950s resolved that they would put this weapon to work to do good for the world while doing everything they could think of to protect against its proliferation and use in hostilities. And interestingly, 79 years later, basically for all practical purposes, the lifetime of a human being, they have been successful. And of course, what do you do after you succeed with a human lifetime? You have to do it all over again. That's how we look to the future when it comes to the harnessing of the atom. That is what we have to take on, because we are living in the counterpart of the 1950s when it comes to AI. We are the people living in the first decade after this technology has gone through this breakthrough and offers so much to the world. We are the ones who will make the decisions that will set humanity on its course. We must succeed. It takes a broad tent. It will require every part of the human family to come together the way we will come together tomorrow. We need to do our work well. And let's hope that if we do, 8 decades from now, other people will follow us, and they'll have the opportunity to build on what we've created. Thank you.
Thank you.